Hello, and welcome back. Northstar here with another HOI4 Got to Damarun single player US socialist run. Um, Here, I've been fighting through. Sorry, hair's getting in the way. I want to grow out something to save on haircuts, and because I mean to donate it. Um, Find a place where I can do that. It's a bit of a drive, and I want my car to family. This family member never takes consideration my needs, and constantly he says, "Oh, I'll make myself available," but then never makes themselves available to actually get me to this appointment. I take a day off work so I can have use of my own car. It's oh god, toxic people, toxic, self-centered people in my life. But hmm, well, I don't buy into the idea entirely of suffering makes you stronger. There is some truth to being marginalized, forcing you to be creative and think more. Um, Indeed, in the United States here. Um, Socialists, Marxists, communists have been remarkably creative and produced an immense amount of academic and intellectual work for their very small numbers in real terms. Partly because they've been marginalized so long through the Cold War, um, through the Red Scares, stolen 1944 Democratic Party convention, which could have had someone who's probably a Democratic Socialist as the president after FDR, through a stolen democracy we have today, where oligarchs essentially buy elections with campaign donations. Um, I've got a list of some books here I've heard recommended, some of which I've read a little bit of. But over the decades, socialists produced everything from "Is the red flag still flying?" to the People's Republic of Walmart. Yes, you heard that right. The People's Republic of Walmart, about how large corporations actually operate very similar to a centrally planned economy, and there are actually lessons from how they work that could be used, um, both to do a more successful centrally planned economy in the future, a socialist future, but also to these corporations, if they were nationalized, their existing systems could just be a lot preserved and maybe in some cases slightly adapted to not favor, inequality. Um, because worker control means production is critical socialism, so that means workers' cooperatives or nationalization and centrally planned economies. Market socialism or centrally planned, those are basically the options, or a kind of community owned, um, which starts to blur the lines a little, where you have like towns owned businesses, but not the federal government. Few books could be interesting, worth noting. From Is the Right Flags to Find, The Great Conspiracy Against Russia, Failed Stalinist Utopia, The Real uh, Capitalism Hits the Fan, Socialism Betrayed Behind the Collapse of the Soviet Union, Terrorism Against Cuba. This is about some of the CIA terrorism campaigns. Towards a New Socialism by Paul Cockshott. He's a British guy. I don't know if he has Trotsky leanings or something. He occasionally says things are very off base, but sometimes he's good. Um, the Wealth of Some Nations, Imperialism, and the Mechanics of Value Transference. I think there was, it was like 14 things they don't tell you about capitalism. Red Star over China, How the Workers' Parliament Saved the Cuban Revolution, um, The Restoration of Capitalism in the Soviet Union, Wage, Labor, and Capital by Marx, and Value and Profit, How the World Works by Paul Cockshott, Arguments for Socialism, also by Cockshott. Yeah, that's quite a name. The Global Perspective, Reflections on Imperialism and Resistance by Torkel Oysen, Unequal Development by Samir Amin, The New Law of Value and Historical Materialism, also by Samir Amin, the Entrepreneurial State by Mariana Mazzucato, Bad Samaritans by Hodge June Chain. Those are just examples of some of the insane number of books written by socialist Marxists, not just in the United States, but worldwide. They've been much more prolific, whereas most of what you get in the US is like mercenary academia, is the best way to describe it. You have assholes around Norfolk and stuff, these CIA associated think tanks around DC and Baltimore and Norfolk that are just funded by the State Department or by the CIA or by right-wing billionaires, and they just endlessly produce garbage quality academic works, not motivated by passion like most Marxists are, or considering it a valid way to look at the world that or considering socialism, say, to be a valid way and look at the world that produces useful insights. Some people are attracted to it because it has greater explanatory power. But these garbage quality right wing academics, they just produce stuff for the, because they get their paychecks from these think tanks. But yeah. Sorry, I was just demonstrating a huge number of books, and maybe some of you will find some of these interesting. But in this alt history, if the U.S. goes socialist, the Communist Party USA and Democratic Socialism, highlighting the Democratic Socialism focus here, presumably, socialists wouldn't be so marginalized, and maybe they'd be less creative. So there's a silver lining to bad things, and there's a darker lining to good things. Socialism is an idea that's still very much in its infancy compared to the long history of exploitation that capitalism comes from, descending away from an evolution of feudalism. Let's do a song for a chill and then what we're due, because this is fundamentally about the future. Anyway, I redid my Navy a bit here. Decided I'm just going to do, these will be 32 destroyers once everything merges. I hope it works correctly. Because you're always guaranteed to have at least one of your convoy escort task forces when a sub engages. Having fewer, bigger forces helps ensure that I'm more likely to have a lot more destroyers present. Then sometimes the other will come and reinforce, or other task forces, and they're like those on naval exercises. But these strike forces may arrive. But having lots of destroyers present is good, because sometimes, well, subs don't need a zillion destroyers to hunt them down. If they become exposed, they'll get quickly sunk by the depth charges they have. If the Confederates send like a light cruiser or heavy cruisers up like a strike force to join the battle, I want the destroyers to massively outnumber them and just sink those cruisers in a swarm of torpedoes, and less likely that the same destroyer will get hit twice, although the waiting for getting shot by, well, any of the weapon types goes up if a ship's already damaged. But it's still a waiting system, so if you have a big fleet, a damaged ship is less likely to get hit twice in a row. With a destroyer can only maybe take a couple salvos. It's less likely to, before it sinks, it's less likely to lose ships. Well, of course, having more attack power, so redoing things, because the Confederates shouldn't have that many subs. Just a little skirmishing. Eventually, when I've dealt with some of their subs and need to do less with convoy escort, then I'll probably start raiding off the Florida coast here. Florida coast sea zone and the Gulf Coast eventually. It really would just be catching supply convoys that are stopping by their ports, like up here in Norfolk. Eventually I'll do probably a naval landing around Norfolk in these three provinces adjacent, and then move in. I may have a naval invasion that starts a day or two later that actually lands Norfolk itself, though, because you can get a medal if a division makes an opposed naval landing and succeeds. But they'll need divisions that don't suffer the amphibious invasion penalty supporting. So it'd be more of a raid, though, because after I take it, I might pull back out by sea, having gained a medal, and do this again later rather than trying to defend. Maybe not. I don't want this war to go too long, but getting extra medals is useful, and it's not just for harvesting medals. That would be kind of cheeky. The whole strategy. There's probably ships repairing in Norfolk, so the idea is to interrupt repairs of the Confederate ships, and if I suffer very few casualties, probably actually do more damage to whatever division's in Norfolk, destroy it if it's encircled. So it's a raid. Wipe out a division, interrupt, repair ships, and then get the heck out of Dodge real quick and repeat maybe on a different port, like here in North Carolina or the Charleston port. It's different places I can do this kind of thing. Well, I probably don't want to do it on Marsh, but here in North Carolina, this naval base, maybe land on the plains, move in. It's hard to, you can't really encircle here though unless I land the Marsh. Maybe just Norfolk. If I wanted to be really cheeky, I'd take Virginia, build a naval research facility here, let them lose it, take it, to interrupt the project. You can get more naval XP, more research boost that way if a project keeps getting interrupted. Because you get more iterations than average. It's if I wanted to be really cheeky, and it's cheeky and it's kind of cheesy. Probably shouldn't do that. What is sound strategy is grabbing Houston, New Orleans, Atlanta, Norfolk, and Richmond, and I have all the major industrial centers of the Confederacy, and even though they won't have surrendered probably quite, they'll be close. I can build up before making a final push, or I can pull back, because the Mexicans are attacking me, so I may take some of these centers, urban centers, and leave weak forces to defend that will slowly get pushed out. Push back. They will have like Nazi volunteers and stuff, so the Nazi tanks might be able to push them here and there. And concentrate my forces in the Mexican border and maybe try and deal with Mexico, which they'll be socialist, communist by the time attacking me, also be democratic. So I could actually break them into 3 parts: a supervised state, an independent democratic government, and communist. And then the supervised state would probably go communist, because when I flip communist, it would start getting communist support, and so it would eventually merge peacefully with main Mexico. And the independent democratic one would have to be invaded and puppeted or just handed back to Mexico at some point. You know, once they're in my faction, or yeah, there's games I can play with that, but regardless of what I do and how I divide up, whether I balkanize Mexico or not, there's a lot of Latin American countries to push into. There's the risk of Chile trying to join the Axis. Argentina's going democratic, so they won't. Yeah. Get the resources of Latin America will be a much easier task dealing with the Nazis in Europe. And there will be a communist government in Iberian Peninsula regardless. So you'd be the Stalinist Spanish Republic or the anti-Stalinist Spanish Commune that will rule Iberia. And end up, if it's the Republic, it'll probably end up in a faction with Belgium. So come to Belgium's aid when France will join the Czech Entente, most likely. Once the Germans are at war with France, they'll try and go around Maginot. If they're Belgium, that'll pull Spain into the war. Or if the communist somehow wins, which is incredibly unlikely, they should end up in a faction that they create with the Soviet Union. So, could be interesting either way, say the least. Since Yugoslavia is going its historical communist path, they might end up, well, not necessarily historical, could actually be the Comintern version. They could end up guaranteed by the Soviets against the Germans. If that happens, like in my multiplayer game, when that's actually the case. So I've been talking a bit here, so I'll get to, doing stuff quick. If that happens, that's another way that Spain, which would end up in a faction with the Soviets if it's the commune. Either way, Iberia will end up in the war and end up on my side, unlike the multiplayer game where the whole Iberian Peninsula is going to fascist. It's going to be a hassle, and Chile is also, they're monarchist in that run. Argentina is eventually going to go fascist. They could leave the Bolivarian Alliance in that game. So yeah, very different histories here, even though they're both U.S. games. Interesting. Here, Sweden could leave the Axis, and let's see, I should point out, there is the Commonwealth of Nations led by Canada. Also led by Canada, so if I ever wanted, I could attack the major cities in Canada and the whole faction would surrender, I could do a very quick lightning war. It's a way to turn that whole faction communist, but also lift to its own the UK, which is going almost certainly non-aligned. We'll eventually start monarchist revolts in every one of those countries and retake them. Which will slowly destroy that faction. So I have to think about what I want to do there. One thing at a time. Star Solidarity. Here we go. Good symbolism. Alright. Reduce just to the CAS, the most expensive aircraft. I don't want suffering air accidents, because CAS that's not actually taking off doesn't suffer air accidents, only if they actually fly missions. Since there's only, within the air zone, there's only this one battle. Only 18 aircraft can actually eat this, and there's only 16 doing it right now. That's probably because of the terrain penalties. Enemy air support, yeah. 18 minus 1.6, it rounds down. 16 is the most aircraft, so I don't need all those other aircraft. Oh yeah, the mud dried up from reloading the save. This is a different day than when I was recording previously. It's not like I did that intentionally, but it does mean I can march into areas that were muddy before, because the game has made the mud disappear. Like here. Push this river. Along here I've got divisions marching. End up with 4 divisions here. I guess then they can swing to deal with this. These guys, I'm just going to keep pushing. These planes aren't worth much, but they are ground that we'll have to take later. Well, don't want the Confederates give them a chance to reorganize, and they do provide a little local supply, which is mostly based on control of victory points, but state control, or no, the local, there's 2 types of supply, that's right, sorry. There's victory point, and then there's local supply, based on what percent of the provinces you control. Like, I get just shy of 30% of the local supply already. Which 1.5 point E of that's, you always get the full value of that, so it's 0.8 times, so I get 0.24 local supply, but it'll increase with every province I take. So yeah, decided to create new general under Garreau. I think I put the Panama Canal forces under him, since there's very little chance that Panama Canal is suffering amphibious assault right now. Might as well get them up to regular, and they will actually produce Army XP from exercises. It won't update the thing until tomorrow, unless it rounds down to 0 because it's so little. But yeah, might as well train him. Also the divisions on the Mexican border over there, and this one, since these divisions are both in combat. It's just 36th Infantry attacking? And when did they start this? I thought they were holding still. Guess it stops these guys from entrenching too deeply. It's not all terrible. And these guys arrived, they could help in that fight. Pretty sure the AI just automatically launched that attack. I don't remember doing it myself. Be able to tell by, oh, there's no planning, to see how the planning bonuses decrease. So yeah, the main thrust, and probably the Nazi forces would have appeared in New Orleans, because I think I explained, this isn't like anyone I don't like is Nazis. This is literally Nazi German forces, volunteers that should have arrived in New Orleans like a day ago. And they should be working their way up. So Little Rock's going to be the crux of everything. Balfour, Arkansas, which is maybe what I'll call this video. I'll have to fight Nazi tanks. Should eventually get some help from the Italian divisions which arrived. a tank division and a regular division. Regulars are actually better than standard infantry. I think they take more equipment, but they actually have slightly higher stats. If I'm not mistaken, higher org or attack or something. They're actually slightly better, but usually in special divisions you can't change the template of, so they're better than like an division. This is better than just infantry plus an engineer, but they don't have even artillery. So, and then there's Soviet divisions. They'll probably only be here for a few weeks, but they should take this little province here, not connected to anything. Looks like there's Soviet tanks marching, going down to the Delmarva Peninsula. Tell me retake that from the Confederates. And elsewhere, I don't know where the others are going. They're strategic redeploying somewhere. Tanks and mountaineers. Yeah, this division's been reassigned to MacArthur. When they have enough org, they'll probably automatically join the fight. Got divisions massing in Birmingham. There we go. Didn't make much sense the way it was. Cool. So Battle of Birmingham won't begin before too long. These guys have terrible breakthrough, but decent defense, so I believe they have some support equipment, yep. Which gives them very high defense for their numbers, so with engineers, so they have enough to not suffer crits and they can just hold ground. These two infantry will probably be marching in. And these guys, can they get there before this division that's marching? The coastal guards? Nope. But that would leave Birmingham undefended. It's 1 victory point, so I shouldn't get a medal or anything for fighting for it. These guys are almost totally reorganized. It's mostly a matter of gaining planning before they attack. Across the river, and if MacArthur sets the auto launcher, I have to manually. Wait. Number of fights has just increased. This was 7, now there's 10, so 3 more fights just broke out and I missed it. Oh, these guys, which are marching, these planes got interrupted by an attack. Looks like 10th Infantry is not considered to be in multiple combats. Is there a type being attacked by the 2nd Volunteer Mounted Rifles? Why do not have multi-combat penalties? Here's another fight. Should be up to 34 aircraft that can support that. Oof, looks like I actually need to assign another air. There we go. This should be able to gain 6 more aircraft doing bombing runs. Bigger air support bonuses would be nice. Kind of tired here. Oh yeah, something, well, cheeky, but that's probably gonna have to happen. When I do take Arkansas, I'll get 5,000 rifles and 10,000 people. But since normally you'll equip 1 out of 10 people with rifles, even an infantry battalion, like a fully equipped, I guess the idea is most 9 out of 10 people are support staff or equipment is really enough. So maybe it's people show up with like dozens of rifles, I don't know, or ammunition, whatever it is. when I get the, it's also a reason I might want to withdraw from major urban centers so I can take more states before I win, because you can get 10,000 manpower for each state you retake from an event. But yeah, when I get the sympathizers, the loyalists from Little Rock. Sorry, it's a little much for me right now. Also stressed, dealing with toxic family, all sorts of nonsense. Sleeping poor as I often do with my long COVID. When I get them, I'll have to raise the garrison law. Here I figured out I probably want to, it treats it without any equipment fulfillment as if I'm running military governor. I probably actually want to do is secret police law because you get extra bonus factories from that. Run local autonomy until I'm right around like 10-11% resistance, then switch it to secret police garrison law, or it'd be when it gets to 10. Yeah, it's cheeky forming a secret police. So the U.S. actually historically did form a secret police that was later ruled unconstitutional and disbanded during World War I. Wilson was behind that. FBI created some like secret police networks that were spying on citizens illegally for signs of quote unpatriotic activity, i.e. anti-war activism. So it's not unprecedented, and while this is not something congruent with socialism, this is still the capitalist Democratic Party, so it may not even be FDR's idea, but you know, some senator, he agrees to do it. So they'll shut up or something. Democracy is sometimes, unfortunately, when it's shady stuff like that, all about compromise. Oh yeah, I think I mentioned last thing. The amount of support I need for the Two Ocean Navy Act and the Selective Training Act dropped. I don't think it dropped when the Confederacy broke out. I think it's because I'm at war. I don't need it. I only need a smaller amount of support because I'm at war, so it's easier to justify expand the Navy. If that's the case, I'll definitely want to run those. I'm just going to do a Selective Training Act so I can get war economy. So Selective Training Act, and then before I finish Guarantee the American Dream, start running war propaganda. That'll get me up to like 57% war support, and I'll go war economy and have the political power. Eventually go limit intervention. That'll get me up to like 67. I won't be able to do total mobilization for a very long time, so I might as well war economy. Do it before limit intervention, which doubles the political power costs and means need support in Congress on top of everything else. But yeah, so definitely, want to expand the Navy. These two main MIOs, Norfolk and Newport News. Newport News will probably do all my design work, but eventually I'll try and grow up Norfolk so I can assign vertical integration and save some steel and have them be the production MIO that's assigned to build ships but doesn't design them or do any more research, just to save a little steel. It's a very late game thing, but I may eventually end up doing that, especially if I'm not aggressive enough containing the Nazis. This could be a prolonged war to displace them from Europe, especially if they overrun France and then down to Spain, because Spain fought against them. And the Soviets are very weak here. They've waited way too long to try and get rid of Stalin, the right opposition path, so they'll almost certainly fold if invaded. It's not like the thing that the Nazis thought would happen. Kick in the door, whole structure collapses, but didn't, because the Soviets are much stronger than that and more united than the Nazis thought. But here, they actually are that disunited in this alt history, and they will almost certainly fold. The AI cannot handle a desperate situation well. So, and I've launched a battle here. This is one of the 10 I see against the Texas Mounted Rifles. Keep them from entrenching or reorganizing. Not a bad idea. I didn't launch that, which means the AI did it. Fun. I really need these guys to stop and plan. Eventually, I'm losing more men. Some of these last offensives grind to a halt. Definitely have to tell the generals it's time to, dig in the mounds here. So gain some of the mountain provinces and tell MacArthur, Bradley, and Clark to stop auto-attacking. Just wait for planning bonuses. Not under grand battle planning. I'm under superior firepower though, so it's less worthwhile to sit in a trench or any of that. Now we have the first doctrine of superior firepower at that. These guys should be able to, when they arrive, push down. I could grab Atlanta, at least temporarily, and if I can't hold it, I think there's a military factory there, so that'll interrupt production. I think when the Confederates regain it, they actually get all their previous production efficiency back, but I'm not sure. Nonetheless, a raid on Atlanta, and a division should get a medal from that, and this air base will deny them another place that Nazi aircraft can operate out of, because they shouldn't have any air force of their own, I don't think. It's giving me zero information, but I'm pretty sure they have no air force, but the Nazis may have sent air volunteers to them. The spirit of rebellion. Interesting. Peters out in October of next year, so it's only for first year. So if the U.S. is AI, they don't fold too quickly. It leads to the U.S. Second Civil War being massive, expensive in lives, though, if it's an AI-controlled war on both sides. Because the AI sucks at these things. Really stupid. Really bad. Reinforcements are on the way here, so these guys will actually not fold. It's 5 days, 4, even 3 should be plenty of time for Clark to pull in the reinforcements. Essentially, it worked cycling these guys. Although when I have the reinforcements, I'll actually have more firepower than they will. So, not only will I outlast them, but I'll do way more damage than they do. Especially with the defender's advantage of terrain and breakthrough instead of defense. They'll suffer crits. I won't suffer crits. They'll have reduced attack. I will have no such penalty, etc. Another defense battle. Where is this one? I'm up to 11 fights now. This is across a river. Looks like MacArthur is planning to aid this. Just realized this is a similar color to Bradley here. Maybe that was a bad choice of color. There we go. Cyan. It's too similar to green. Sky blue. There we go. Sufficiently different. Ugh, it's an ugly color though. There we go. It's a reasonable, slightly too light shade of blue. There we go. Near the ocean, it blends in a little bit. It doesn't really stand out here in Panama or whatever. There's always going to be a problem if most of the colors aren't. It's too hard. You can set anywhere on the color palette, but they don't all show up on the map well. Some of them set a certain color and it'll show an entirely different one on the map. There we go. Soviet tanks have pushed Delmarva Peninsula. In our world, there's a bridge that connects here, but it wasn't built until way after World War II, like in the 70s. So it's not like the tanks can just roll across the bridge. This is much too wide a gap for tanks to be able to realistically cross without doing, a naval invasion from a port, so they're stuck. This is a rural area. There's no port facilities here. I've been there once. More than once, but I've been there. And yeah, this is very rural. So whatever, they've taken this area. It was even more rural back in this time period. Now they'll roll somewhere else. But this denies a tiny bit of local supply to the Confederacy, so it's not useless. It won't matter yet, but later they'll reach a point of supply crisis sooner if I take supply hubs from them, which are in Richmond and Norfolk. Take those and they'll be in trouble. Munitions plant is almost done. I'll start producing basic rifles for my garrisons, which is good. Probably have to use some M1s though for garrisons because I'm not going to produce those quick enough. Yeah, it would take months and months and months to produce enough rifles. Just one factory like that. The starting efficiency of oil like 10%. Concentrate industry because it's gonna be a long war, so there'll be time for its higher maximum production levels to be reached. Sort of scale up, but I'm doing fine. Being less equipped here actually makes this more of a challenge. Little Rock. I didn't overrun any division in Little Rock. What? But this battle in Texas and Little Rock are some of the most expensive for me in manpower. These guys are getting circled. This is one of the best divisions. Seems to have line artillery. I'll march here. I'll take this and I'll just destroy them. They won't have encirclement penalties, technically, but they'll know where they can retreat to. Since they don't have multi-access to Mexico, and they'll just get wiped out. Which is cool. I'll capture some artillery pieces they desperately need. These guys are reorganizing, which is good. Still gets done the same day. Yeah, I want to get the New Jersey factory done sooner. Cool. This can go to the bottom of the list. Maybe I have this one because there's 3, but yep. Civilian factory in New Jersey. The last one might have just gone right into consumer goods. Into New York, Kentucky, Missouri. Keep developing my civilian economy. This will help me to not only build more mill in the long run later, but in dockyards, but also stuff like anti-air guns, radar. But one of the research facilities to run improvements to my intelligence agency, which I'll definitely need to do a lot of those, and missions. Some of them can cost civ. And one of the big things, special projects, that's resources and buying resources eventually to delay going out free trade a little longer. There's something, it's on the tip of my tongue, it'll come to me in a sec. What else do I need civ for? Research, intelligence, trade, weapons purchases. Well, intelligence stuff, that's going to be expensive. Cause the Nazis all sorts of problems with my intelligence agencies. Oh, yeah, that's what it was. Resources. Eventually, I want to take decisions to like expand the steel and aluminum. I mean, well, not aluminum, the steel in Ohio and Pennsylvania. I'll eventually reach a steel crisis, even if I switch to export focus. That'll allow me to not have to go to limited exports, hopefully, though, for longer. This is going to be a long, long, long war. Historically, I think the steel production was ramped up some during World War II in the U.S., so, and it certainly could have been, even if it wasn't. People complain there's not enough steel on the map at the beginning of the game for the U.S. to massively industrialize. Well, either change your trade law or expand your steel industry, dumbasses, or both. I mean, maybe it's unrealistic, but for game balance, it makes some sense. It does represent some of the patterns of, making long-term economic investments and I don't know. U.S. produces an enormous amount of steel. The trade system kind of is stupid. You reserve resources for export that don't actually get exported. It's a particular problem with oil. 489 my 611 oil I can't use. It just disappears in the void. Very little gets bought, for instance. So that's one reason I want to change the trade law. Just keep more oil for a huge air force and armor and stuff eventually. Motorized divisions. Oh, yeah. With army doctrines, if things go really long, I could eventually switch from ground battle plan to mobile warfare when I've used the extra command power to improve my navy for a while and promote generals and use the grand battle plan is actually more manpower efficient. You get more strength, more effective utility than if you're doing the left-sided mobile warfare, the desperate defense one, which gives you very few bonuses, but more recruitable population. It's still better than the right-sided mass assault doctrine, if you do not like the Soviets with terrible supply. So, and terrible industry. If you have the industry for tanks, but you are going to be short on manpower. But I could eventually switch to left side mobile warfare. If you do the mobile infantry stuff, particularly, it is a stronger grand battle plan, but only if you have the the industry to build a ton of motorized troops. A lot of players, they play Germany and they just base their entire strategy about eating other countries quickly, but you can't do that as the US. You have a slow time to mobilize. It means a late war. Even if you go communist or fascist, you're not gonna be like 25 aircraft. I would have sworn. Whatever. Where's my air superiority bonuses? Oh, enemy air superiority. Reduce defense, 26.6. Cool. Worried I'll miss something, and I thought it was sharper in this, but I think it's probably I've been distracted, talked too much, so I'm gonna need to quiet down a little here. Whatever, I know what I'm doing strategically. Alright, these guys really need to advance. They got enough org. They don't need a zillion organization to push into undefended province. Another day so I can get a little more planning, I guess. If they don't do something, I'll have to have them march themselves, even though microinland like that causes them to lose planning faster. Basically overriding the order of the general. Hmm. Are these guys not advancing? Planning, I guess. Still no one showing up to block my thrust to Houston. I could do that. Semi-reasonably. I just need a few more divisions to not have coals in my line. Maybe after I've crushed this attack. Yep. It's the more that these guys are in, definitely win this fight. Already have more firepower and more than enough org in the fight to win. Individual divisions could get deorged, but particularly the 41st Infantry, but I'll definitely win the battle. It's not telling me I'm getting any army XP from exercises, even though I know I have divisions that should be giving some. Very small amounts. They're overtrained. Like they're not at green, these two, so they should be giving tiny amounts of army XP. Rookies, green divisions don't give any when they do exercises. Only trained or above. Weird. Oh. Almost so mind to have the 55th Infantry do exercises, but I really should deal with these CAF before they organize anymore. Alright. That's bloody it. Oh, you know, he's on, he is cautious. I forget, Bradley's cautious. That probably affects how aggressive he is. The personality trait. I'll put him on balance and see if that makes him attack before I... No, he was on aggressive, wasn't he? It's not helping. Shoot. Bradley is more skilled than MacArthur. That actually is probably realistic. I think MacArthur would be attacking if nothing else. Alright, just move. Attack. There we go. Texas-bound rifles. But MacArthur, yeah, he's been getting skilled staff for this whole time. Good. As much as I hate it, the game makes him a brilliant strategist, so I'll want a lot of divisions under him eventually. Yeah, the U.S. needs command power because it has to expand its army command and doesn't start with any people who are amazing sub-commanders, and I feel like to get somebody who's got like chief engineer, gentlemanly, those are both great traits for sub-commanders. Gentlemanly makes enemy retreat more, and from subs you probably want them retreating anyways. The enemy will do it. And org, if they do take that charge, they'll have more org and less penalty through attack and such. And defense, if I remember correctly, is affected by org too. Could be wrong about that. Yeah, I just decided to launch an attack here. I didn't order this one. Or no, it already won this battle. What am I saying? Alright, these guys have plenty of organization. I suppose they could have moved aggressively and cut off the retreat. These cav. Been hard, but doable. Let's launch an all-out attack here. These guys can just go right in here to open up more combat with. Hopefully stay in the reserves, but Lloyd Frendall will eventually see fighting. I want him to at least reach like rank 3. He might eventually become a field marshal. 4 would be great. If I could get him to rank skill 4, that would be the best, because then he would get his field marshal 3 points, 3 trait picks, which would probably be unyielding defender, so he could use smaller divisions to defend. If he's a general, he can just counterattack, but not as a field marshal unless there's no generals under him. Offensive defensive doctrine and ambusher. Just be a highly defensive general I can use to guard my coasts. Let's get some music. This cheeky song. Sort of cheeky. Ah, here are the Soviet volunteers. I don't know where they're going, but it's pretty far west. Maybe they've decided this is the key point of the battle. Schwerpunkt. What are we? From old German. There's no such doctrine as Blitzkrieg. It was actually Schwerpunkt, which means key point. The devs, of course, have made the grand battle plan in German direction. They can take their military doctrine. That one's called Schwerpunkt or something. Or has references to it in the focus tree. Even though there's literally a doctrine called Schwerpunkt. That was the real name of the doctrine type. The Schwerpunkt doctrine. Blitzkrieg is a term that was invented to describe the rapid tank advance through France, but there's no, and the Nazis just overrunning countries with weak militaries in Eastern Europe, like Poland, and their initial advances against the Soviets. But there is, again, no, in marching through Belgium, there's no such doctrine as Blitzkrieg. It's Schwerpunkt. Whatever. But the reason I mention is the Soviets actually, deep battle doctrine was actually very similar to what we ascribe to supposedly Blitzkrieg. A massive emphasis on tanks and breaking through front lines to reach the enemy's strategic depth. That was Soviet military doctrine historically, not. Schwerpunkt was about finding the key point or front line to break it, whereas deep battle had a greater emphasis on reaching the strategic depth, and as a counter to opponents doing that, defense in depth, which is the third doctrine of the deep battle doctrine tree. It even says about striking deep in enemy territory, but the bonuses don't line up with the historical focus on armor it had. Soviets, of course, they had to abandon the point of their military doctrine they'd worked out, which in many ways was the most advanced military doctrine in the world. They couldn't build enough tanks to, and enough, importantly, trucks to support the tanks to do. They realized their industry wasn't up to task, unlike the Germans who tried it anyways and failed. Um, and so they switched to a greater emphasis on infantry. This would probably be like in the game if they swapped from left-sided to right-sided mass assault doctrine at some point. This one should be infantry focused and is, but deep battle should have a greater emphasis on armor bonuses and motorized instead of supply, as if the supply network is unrealistically thin in Soviet Union. The reasons Nazis had supply problems wasn't because there weren't supply hubs or trains. It was because the Nazis are pushing before they can convert the rail gauges. Sometimes the railways were sabotaged and they didn't have the trucks to support the huge logistics demand of that many tanks. But it wasn't, the Soviets weren't like nearly as backwards in terms of rail network density as is portrayed in the game. One thing they did have was trains. Russia had started to industrialize even before the Russian Revolution. It had occurred, Soviet Union rose when when Russia was at the very precipice of massive industrialization. Anyways, because communists took over, it was able to be done with a much greater level of quality than, say, U.S. 19th century industry, where you had, like in New York City, you had the overall national statistics get skewed by the push out west. But if you look at the coastal cities, like New York City in particular, you have people living in horrendously crowded slums, very similar to like London housing conditions in the Industrial Revolution. Whereas the Soviets built the infamous so-called Soviet blocks, but that housing was incredibly spacious compared to what farmers who came into cities for the first time were expected to live in industrializing Western Europe and Eastern United States. Of course, it wasn't up to the standards of the West, because the Soviet Union was still like decades behind the West by the time it collapsed, but it was catching up. And at that point in their history, when they built the infamous so-called commune blocks, they also were already being embargoed by the West. So after World War II, they were having to rebuild tons of destroyed housing from World War II. They were under Western embargoes, thanks to Truman being a shit and starting the Cold War with his Truman doctrine of, quote, encirclement and containment of communism. And so they couldn't, trade for the investment that would have helped them build better housing. They have all sorts of documents to even confirm that the housing wasn't up to the standards they wanted to build, but they just didn't have the money to build better housing. It's not communism makes you when the regime puts you in shitty housing. It's Western blockade and sanction kind of thing does. Because that's what it was. The Soviets were under essentially sanctions from the United States and NATO after World War II. And remember, they had been the allies of the West. It was just Truman was a backstabbing piece of shit who betrayed a former ally and started demonizing him almost immediately. Instead of, taking a more nuanced view of the Soviets. They had their problems, but doing what he did only created a siege mentality that made the Soviet Union more oppressive and worse. And all right, the AI is being dumb about where to attack. Though they will suffer some defenders. I should probably attack here. I really don't need these guys marching in here. Really don't need that. these guys marching here as well. All right. These guys have had more than enough time. What the heck? Uh, we'll have the best organized, actually the fourth, yeah, the fourth infantryalists trying to do the best organized infantry march there, and 3 hold, and then I'm gonna attack these pricks. No, actually, because anyone that goes here can keep marching further. It's dumb. Yeah, but unsurprisingly, when you encircle a country and try and force regime change on that nation, it leads to uniting the populace and pissing people off against you. And the government has some authoritarian bent, it makes it worse. So it was an authoritarian because communism is authoritarian nonsense. There are problems with Marxist-Leninism, with it bleeding into because of the one-party nature of it. Even though there is democracy in the party, this idea that there isn't is a Western myth and something Trotsky pushed that CIA gobbled up and spread around the world. But it's still harder to make effective counter-arguments to the ruling party when you don't have opposition parties. And the Soviets, because of Russian history and Russian history being authoritarian, having nothing to do with communism, just a long history of authoritarianism that didn't all disappear when the Soviet Union arose. So there were authoritarian tendencies, but it wasn't because of communism, is my point. It was mostly you had this Russian history plus the additional factor of yes, Marxist-Leninism could more easily fall the way if other factors aligned, and the other factors aligned were being under siege from the West and the Russian history, and being a new state that was in its infancy, and the U.S. was trying to do regime change, and it could have democratized if the U.S. had not been trying to destroy it, basically. Um, you could have seen great emphasis. There were systems like mass meetings, and well, the Maoists actually had a better developed doctrine of these things. No, why are you? God, the AI is dumb sometimes. Um, uh, but yeah, the system of mass meetings provided candidates were essentially similar to, if you think of like a mix of a town hall meeting and a party primary, where every so many years people in the communities would meet to choose their local representatives. These meetings were often hosted by local trade unions, which are less about fighting the managers of a workplace for higher wages and better working conditions and such, out of the belief that under socialism, without a ruling class that owned businesses and personally profit off them, there was less need for that. Trade unions became still about protecting workers from individually abusive bosses, but more of a social organizing function. And so often the trade unions would host these mass meetings, sometimes other community organizations, and people would meet. They would debate topics of policy that they weren't allowed to debate the rest of the year, basically, which was a problem, again, Democratic Centralism, but they were allowed to, freely debate issues of policy, select a representative who would be the party, essentially nominee for that office, and go to the general election. And then, so this would usually be 2, 3 days, and it's really well documented in the 1920s, this process, because you had some American immigrants, the Soviet Union, who came back later, and some of them didn't like Stalin stuff, but they wrote about these mass meetings. Some of them participated, but they continued. Just they became a little less important later, and people would pick their candidates, and then the general election, it was a yes/no vote. Do you approve of the person selected at the mass meeting? If no, then if the majority of people voted no, then the candidate is rejected, and they have to hold another mass meeting within a certain time period to select a new one. So that was a system. It got somewhat subverted by Stalin, but it existed, and if the U.S. hadn't besieged the Soviet Union, Stalin would have eventually died, and it's likely the Soviets would have probably returned to a greater emphasis on this mass meeting system and democracy. Attack these guys to hold them. So, yeah, I cannot do encirclements, of course, very well. These guys are going to march into Birmingham while it's undefended, and to cut off escape routes for the enemy here. And these guys are going to attack these so that they can't launch an attack and hold these divisions. So, cool. A lot of micro, but the AI can't be trusted to do something like this on its own. Of course, this manually ordered plans, the divisions lose 3% planning a day, where it's only one of the generals do things on their own initiative. So you don't want to do it too often. So incentive to let the AI handle some of your battle planning, but you don't want to let it do it all, or you'll miss opportunities. Yeah. So Democratic centralism is deeply problematic, as I've said, but it does help socialists win power in the first place. It outlives a lot of its usefulness after they take power, although Marxist-Leninists will claim, well, you're going to be under siege from the West, or capitalist powers or whatever, not necessarily the West, because it could be the West that does the next socialist revolution. But yeah, you may be under siege, but if you double down on controlling political discourse to try and react to that siege, you'll lose in the end. You're better off having a freer society, and then people will be loyal to the state and will actually be more willing to defend the revolution against foreign interference. That's, by the way, literally the analysis of this that the Spartacus League path, alt history path in this game has. If you do German Spartacus League alt history, and what intellectuals like Rosa Luxemburg historically were saying before they were murdered by the Social Democratic Party of Germany. The Social Democrats, the center left party, like the Democratic Party in the US, but a little further left than that. Not socialists, really. They were the people who abandoned socialism. Said basically we can do class collaboration and tame capitalism. And yeah, they murdered Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht. They used neo-Nazi militias that they basically worked with for a little while to murder key leftists. And they have that blood on their hands. People haven't forgotten this, actually, though. I saw a speech by the leader of Die Linke, which is the successor of the Communist Party, KPD, the Communist Party of Germany. The current KPD was unconstitutional, legally basically banned in Germany when it was under U.S. occupation for World War II in West Germany. So, but later this was challenged in court, and what you end up happening is rulings along the lines, but you can't call it the same thing, but you can start a new socialist party, and so the Die Linke is that party. Of course, the damage to the history and continuity was not going to be undone. It was a violation of democratic principles and the results of Truman's bullshit. But Die Linke, anyways, there was a current leader of it had I remember a talk on the internet, and she had literally a picture of Karl Liebknecht and another Rosa Luxemburg on the wall behind her while she was doing a YouTube thing talking about some issue in Europe, but which is kind of a we'll never forget, you know, even if they'll work with the Social Democrats again, they won't forget they can't really trust them because of what happened the last time that the Social Democrats are in power and fascism's on the rise. Because fascism is again on the rise in Germany. Thanks probably like Elon Musk and these pricks going in and interfering with German elections and funding the far right. Because large industrialists often do fund the far right, which, by the way, in case you just think I'm pulling this out of my ass, there's literally a reference to that in the Norwegian fascist path, all history in the game, about large, in fact, it's an economic focus that even democracies can take, which increases fascism support by siding with the large industrialists. That's a reference to this historical trend. Whether you like socialism or fascism or democracy or anything, this is an uncontrovertible fact. Whether you're socialist like me, some right wing, that large industrialists will fund fascist movements because fascists will give them everything they want in terms of crushing labor unions and workers' rights and such, and opposing the communists, of course. Hmm. Sorry, just pausing for a second, close something. Um, and you don't need a conversation open. Don't need wherever random people are watching, stealing a conversation as people. But yeah. Anyways, uh, I'll say I don't like to have too many windows open at a time. So I mean, I think I've made this very clear before. I am a democratic socialist. So I don't mind if democratic socialists, if they work with communists, if they have to get socialism in a country, because it's very hard with especially like the FBI, CIA, and say pieces of shit, not really respecting democracy and always working to undermine left-wing parties, claiming, believing they have the right to do that. It's not really democracy. People aren't free to choose ideas you don't like. um, which, by the way, if you try and go communist via elections in this game and you get the generic, there's even a reference that of you have to respect people choosing something you don't like, accept an outcomes election, versus if you can start a civil war and take the Democratic side to avoid flipping communist or fascist. But yeah, democracy requires you accept even the abolition of democracy via vote if necessary. And it's not the abolition of democracy to have socialism. Socialism is quite compatible with democracy, so that's a lie that was spread by anti-communists historically. But Marxist-Leninists are problematic anyways. Not all Marxists, but Marxist-Leninism has some issues that can... But yeah, democratic socialists to be more than willing to work with the Marxist-Leninists if necessary. And then try and make the case to the public, if there's ever a socialist government power, that you need to maintain opposition parties, or else you're going to lose whatever kind of Cold War arises against the West. Your people will not remain loyal to your government if you have no opposition parties in the long run. You have to embrace democratic institutions, which is again the name of a literal focus in the Spartacus League path in this game. If you saw my other Let's Play of them, Spartacus League Germany, which I haven't done new videos for a long time, partly because there was a major bug, actually a number of major bugs with the Spartacus League path that weren't fixed until, as it turned out, the next major version, which means I may have to decide if I want to abandon that run and start another German communist path run later. Although maybe I'll do Sweden next, because it's in many ways better fleshed out. No surprise with the devs being Swedish, and then maybe go back and do Germany again later. be more fresh for people who've seen the previous one. It'll have been longer since I did it, too. More original. Cool. I may want to not save up the full 30 days, because if I start that radio stuff a little earlier, it'll take longer, like more days. But I get breakthrough progress every day, and I don't get it from any of this saved up. It's not like I get a bunch of 30 days of breakthrough progress on aerodynamics. At least I don't think I do. I'll check, but I don't think this will jump up 75.2 if I use saved up research days. So we'll get less breakthrough progress, even though I'll spend less days on research. Doing things ahead of time if I save up 30 days first. And I'll need that breakthrough progress because I'll need one breakthrough in aerodynamics to get radar. Aerodynamics and avionics, whatever. Radar is considered an aero type breakthrough in the game. There's a gaping hole in my line right here. I think the AI pulled a division here. Or I did, maybe. I think I intended to attack here, and I didn't think I would need to defend this, but the way this is going, I probably was wrong. These guys are here to continue this fight, if need be. I'm going to shift men along the line at this point. I'll go there, and these guys need to reorganize anyways. 22nd Infantry will start to tactically withdraw there. No, it's too early. I need to wait till these guys are closer, but they will do that soon. I don't ensure there's no gaps if I can't take this mound soon, which I probably can't. Even if I can, letting those guys reorganize is a good thing. Better position me to strike here. But yeah. Unfortunately, the way this will probably go is if there ever is like a socialist revolution somewhere like, say, the US, which is incredibly unlikely, it'd probably be led by the best organized parties in the US are Marxist-Leninists, specifically Maoists. The Black Panthers are Maoists, the Party for Social Liberation, Party for Socialism and Liberation are Maoist, etc. Now, Maoism is less likely to degenerate than standard Marxist-Leninism because they have a greater emphasis on mass meetings, but it still can. So probably go the Maoists would take power. Democratic Socialists might, if they're smart, work with them. Then there would be a debate in the public on whether to allow opposition parties, and the Democratic Socialists are probably outvoted, which is problematic. But even a Marxist-Leninist government leaves the door open to eventually bringing more democracy into socialism, where there's no possible way usually for capitalism to just go straight into democratic socialism. It's very unlikely to work. So I was actually surprised that the US has a democratic socialist path, as does Mexico and a couple other countries in the game, but it's very rare because it's not likely to work out. There's one time in history that really well known where it did work out, and that was Chile, and the US immediately did a coup and put Pinochet in power. Started planning even before Salvador Allende took power. He would have been a democratic socialist, but he was overthrown. He didn't get to rule for very long, didn't even get to nationalize most industries before he was overthrown by the CIA coup. So, these guys need to start marching here. Or here, actually. Shift men along, and maybe I can gather more in Dallas. These guys seem to be going this way. start shifting these guys. I have 3 divisions in Dallas. If I have 3 divisions in Dallas, the AI will try and do something to eliminate that. Unless these guys start marching out now. Take a little ground towards Houston, I guess. We'll need troops in Dallas anymore once they take these plains, which won't be too long. If I take Houston, I'll control the factories of Texas. San Antonio has not enough victory points for the Confederates to retain control of the industry. I get to 5 Navy XP, I can start design torpedo cruiser. No, I can't. Doesn't have any of the torpedoes yet. Well, I can start my fleet destroyer design, at least the Newport News, supply the MIO, and start building these. And so change the Ralph Talbot to a fleet destroyer instead of an escort. And produce those until I have the Navy XP to actually start making torpedo cruisers. I've taken Birmingham, Alabama. That's some of the victory points in Alabama. It's a very rural state, so even if you take both, you only control 2/3 of the, but it's enough to have the industry. You only need over 50%. But yeah. History has not ended. History never ends. But you can reach a state where the rich have so much power that socialism will be impossible to ever happen. Because there'd be too many right-wing think tanks, too much subversion of democracy, except too much espionage on the population, government spying on its own people, etc. History is long, and maybe someday democratic socialism will get its chance. And the ideas have to be preserved and espoused to have any shot of that. But even a Marxist-Leninist government would be a big step forward for like the U.S., and that'll never happen, probably, through internal change, because instead the U.S. fascism is getting more and more popular, but there's not really support for socialism. So in fact, too much brain rot against it. This is not pause, is it? No, good. But maybe somewhere else, there are countries where it's feasible, where the rich haven't subverted democracy so much that, because you need strong labor unions, that's one of the prerequisites, an educated populace ideally, to have much shot of turning a country socialist. And yeah, trade unions are pathetically weak in the United States, and there are no major parties except for the Democrats and Republicans, and two-party system, which is a gross violation of real democratic principles. It's probably not be changed in the U.S., so probably actually eventually, as capitalism shows more and more of its contradictions, will probably eventually become fascist, because status quo cannot hold. Start the 22nd Infantry that way. Pulling reinforcements, these guys. And those guys get there and then reorganize so I can attack that mountain. Yeah, as inequality gets worse and worse and worse and worse in the US, which it will. If you don't believe it's getting worse, just look at the facts. Look at the Gini index, which keeps growing higher. In Gini index, a low number is better. A high number means more inequality. The Gini index just goes up year after year in the United States, for instance, which is an index both the World Bank and the CIA maintain. The CIA, of all people, can't even deny it. The United States is becoming more and more unequal, and eventually this is not going to be sustainable. You're going to have people starving in the streets because private equity firms have bought so much of the housing, and people can't afford food and housing. Um, they're going to struggle to hold the housing, then bad luck, and some people will, lose both. People will cut back on their food budgets and whatever. You're going to see incredible desperation, and that's going to feed discontent and fascism, and then it's going to arrive much sooner than we think. If Trump doesn't pull off fascism in his lifetime, then it will definitely, unfortunately, happen because AI is going to put a lot of people out of work, and it's going to really accelerate this degeneration of the system. As bad as it's getting worse now, it's going to be so much faster when there's huge numbers of people made employed by AI. And yes, theoretically, those people could train in different jobs and whatnot, but that takes time and government investment and help, and people aren't going to get help. And just leaving people to fend for themselves when that happens, when tens of millions of people are suddenly out of work, that's going to lead to a revolution, and it's probably going to be a fascist revolution. And the U.S. will probably have a second civil war. This is where things are headed, and within my lifetime. So I would like to get out, especially because there's a chance fascism will come much sooner than that with Trump. So you have experts on fascism already leaving the country because they're convinced their children will not grow up in a free country. So it's not just me. But I don't want to just go to Canada like a lot of them are doing. I'd like to get to Europe, far, far away, because the U.S. could try and turn Canada fascist if it goes to fascist itself, or invade. Hopefully not. Probably not, but more likely like CIA subversion to try and undermine the democracy in Canada and force it to fascism. So, which any player of this game should be familiar with how that works, basically. Basic principles of that. All right, peeps. Atlanta's undefended. Move in before someone can cut off your line of retreat. Actually, I want to take this ground as well. The Soviets covering my strategic rear here. And then they'll go swing here. Atlanta will give me control of Georgia. So I'll get loyalist volunteers, 10,000 manpower, 5,000 rifles, and control factories, at least as long as I hold the city. Press my advantage in the war before my offensive loses momentum. Ah, the fight here is over. They're withdrawing? They're withdrawing. That's unexpected. How long ago did this fight end? 3 hours ago. Huh. Okay. They could pull in emergency reserves, so I probably still want these guys to get here. But I am gonna try and take these mountains. It's better defensive terrain than hills and forest. I can dig in the mountains and hold it with fewer men. Move divisions elsewhere. Yeah, hopefully, though, I've described a little better why I think the U.S. is going fascist, because I'm sure some people, you get people who think nothing is ever going to change, and they think anyone says that is off the rocker. No, No, it's because of things that are coming down the pipeline, like self-driving cars, putting millions of truck drivers out of work. Uh, which anyone who knows anything about truck drivers in the U.S. knows they tend to lean fairly far right already. Just wait till they're all out of work. They'll support a fascist. They will definitely support something dangerous. Oh, they're trying to cut off this march south. Won't work. These guys will arrive before this Nazi volunteers do. Oof. They're probably well equipped and well trained. But these guys should have enough defense to avoid crits, so they should be able to hold out for a while. Or pull in reinforcements. Alright. Yeah, there are very real, very dangerous trends that are happening. It changes technology and changes in social balances of power. When did this happen? Took that area south of Birmingham, created encirclement, and the AI, as usual, lost its mind and decided to drop weird front lines. Always happens. These guys will take this. Actually, I have the 44th Infantry supporting, so they stay here and don't move into the forest next. Sure, nobody can march up here if it goes. If divisions show up here. Hmm. Cool. Alright. Do something about this nonsense, or I'll end up with divisions moving places I do not want later. Closing in on reaching the Gulf Coast here. Push south. Cool. These 3 divisions are closing this encirclement. The Coast Guard should actually have the encirclement penalty. Weird. They don't. Hmm. Force 40th, 47th, or 49th, 47th. One of these divisions. 49th has the least breakthrough. Okay. Cool. I was gonna say, could have them go here and then attack. The fight won't go that long, I think. Maybe. I'll have to strategically redeploy them across the river. But once they're there, it'll be useful. They can eventually support this battle too. Why does it think they're doing a shouted retreat? They're not under attack here. The game did not correctly analyze whatever shouted retreat. Still arrives quicker than normal marching, and they actually can reorganize during it. It's fast enough, I suppose. Even if it's buggy as heck, it'll work. But yeah, Marxists take power in a country, that system can still potentially be reformed to something that's more democratic, whereas capitalism is degenerating to fascism all over the world. That being said, I do not support an end to democracy. It's just saying there's still hope if that happens. And there is democracy within even the Marxist-Leninist system. It's just not. Democratic centralism is incompatible with multi-party democracy. Single-party democracy is flawed, even if it authentically attempts to be democratic, which it often does in socialist countries. It's not, but it's a flawed approach, and eventually there are long-term consequences. Is what I'm saying. It's a shame the Marxists are right about most things, but all it takes is one really big error. And to be fair, part of the reason the Soviets got rid of opposition parties wasn't just democratic centralism. It was because the opposition parties sided with the White Russians in the Russian Civil War, and so there was a lot of bad blood there. But it set a precedent that other communist countries then went along with. Right. Anyways, this is Democratic Socialist run. I don't know if it would ever theoretically, it's probably an unbelievable history, but if it were possible in this time period, history could have looked very different. Democratic Socialists rise in power in the US in a good way. Much better world we would have lived in. Cool. Won this fight. Gonna face maybe one division here. These guys can go back to Air Superior. Oh, the moment that had to happen right around midnight, didn't it? Bloody A. These guys took the province and immediate issues. Immediate problems. Instead of having march in the mountains, march into these forests. I'll prevent counterattacks here if this goes badly. But yeah, history shows. Don't forget the Soviet Union reformed itself out of existence. It peacefully broke up. It wasn't some free for economic collapse. So Gorbachev's reforms caused serious economic problems. It was literally, it reformed itself out of existence, which is to say, peaceful change is possible. Systems, and it doesn't have to be one that leads to a system collapsing. It can lead to a system getting better and still existing. If I can take these plains east of Atlanta, I'll have a river defensive line from any pushes from the east. All right, when Atlanta's taken this front line, so this is fine. Volunteers from Georgia. As our forces have advanced into Georgia, they've come across a large number of sympathetic citizens who have long harbored hidden sympathies towards us. Swept up in a wave of patriotic fervor, they've asked to join our military. Integrate them into the army. Manpower, nice. All right. I'm gonna need to free up. Also want to garrison division is going to have to become a higher priority for equipment. Time to do something I'd rather not do, but if I want to get the rifles out while they're still available, create secret police in Tennessee and Georgia to set the resistance target at. It was acting as if it had military governors, so it was actually laxer, but without more compliance, they can't reduce the target below 10% anyhow. Saying it's 6, but it'll go up to 11 once the garrison law is fulfilled. Same here. This is saying it's 11. But 35 minus 5, so 30, 41, 46. No, this actually has to be military governor Atlanta. Secret police in Tennessee. Cool. I'll at least give me more manpower, I guess, from Georgia for now. then I can really relax this secret police, and then eventually, with enough compliance, local police force. Later garrison laws require less equipment, so I can always relax it later. I need enough garrisons to. In this battle here, well, it's over. Anyways, it's not. It's technically in Alabama, so why isn't it showing? Saying 8 hours ago, maybe it completed. I didn't even notice it. Just cause weirdness as soon as they arrive. So, boom. These guys are moving along with the logical path, but here, I actually want these guys to march east. To Atlanta. Okay, no weird behavior from the eye. Well, this will have to do. Hour and 47 minutes. Almost tempted to cut this in two. So, viewers, I wish you all the best. Take care of each other. Be kind to yourselves. And may you always find guiding star leading home. Until next time, this is Northstar. I do. And best luck.